Alright, next up we have Shea, and he's going to do a chapter out of his book.
Hey, first I want to say, isn't it amazing the talent that we have here? Thank everybody. Look at what I'm following. I'm like, I hope this is going to be good enough. And also, going on something that Jeff said, before I get to my story, I'll give a little bit of dating advice myself. Sometimes all it takes is just asking the girl out. Like, date number 3 with the English girl I've been seeing. And if anybody doesn't know, I'm seeing this English girl that I met at work. Date number 3, she tells me that she's often gotten before from guys that she's attractive, that she's cute, which she is, she's adorable. And then she says, but none of them ever asked me out. She said, you asked me out. So I'm like, wow, go me for taking some initiative. Sometimes, guys, it is that simple. Ask her out. All right, on that note, okay, so I'm sorry for the new people who are just coming here for the first time, because this is chapter 3 of my young adult novel. It's a story about, it takes place back in medieval times in a land that's kind of modeled after medieval England. And it's kind of a reverse Cinderella. It's about a peasant boy named Lucas, and he falls in love with the princess. So this is chapter 3. Now, the previous 2 chapters, this is told in a frame narrative, which means it's like a story within a story. There is a storyteller that is telling the story to a group of kids. And for the sake of time, the last 2 chapters I've left out the frame. But this is a rather short chapter, so I'm going to read the whole thing, even with the frame part with the kids. So it'll start with that, and then at some point on the next page, it'll like break off to the kids being told the story again. So hopefully you're not too confused by that. All right, so Jeff, how'd you get the reverb in here? This sounds like I'm in a cave.
It's called a cheap mic.
What?
It's called a cheap mic.
It's obvious. Just use your imagination.
All right, so chapter 3, Don't Get Elf-Struck. The girl's faces lit up, delighted that Bede's tale was turning into a love story. I love this story, Uncle Bede, said Mildred. It's so romantic, added Audrey. The boys appeared less impressed. You've told better ones, said Dave. Yeah, said Saxon. When do we get to more action? I think, boys, you will not be disappointed with what's coming up next. Lucas lay in bed, awake as an owl, unable and unwilling to evict Stephanie from his head. What a beautiful girl. She was more beautiful than any he had encountered before. Her sparkling eyes were so blue, he reckoned they must be ever bluer than the ocean. Her long, beautiful, light brown hair, he thought a lovely shade. The shade of nature, a leaf in the fall, the fertile Albion soil, the bark of a tree. It was the most beautiful hair he had seen. Her skin was flawless, the skin of royalty, free of the blemishes that had come of hard labor and color that suggested a life spent indoors. Whatever town she came from, she must be a yeoman, or yeowoman. A commoner she may be, but certainly not one like him. No, there was something different, something special about this girl. Then there was her scent. She smelled clean, as if she had a bath every single day. Who bathes every day? Most simply didn't have the time. This girl smelled to Lucas as clean and fresh as one's laundry hung out to dry on a spring morning. Maybe she wasn't even a mortal girl. Maybe she was an angel from heaven, incapable of producing the foul odors. Or maybe she was a fairy or a sprite. How slight and delicate she appeared. Lucas imagined she could have simply blown away if the wind had gotten too strong. Yes, all of these thoughts and more were swirling about Lucas's head that night, so much so that, blimey, he's got it bad. Enough. Yes, Lucas's thoughts are a bit exaggerated, but that is how a man thinks when he's in love. You boys will find out shortly. Anyway, as I was saying, Lucas sat up. He felt full of energy. He had to move around. As quietly as he could, he got up and pulled on his breeches. Though no one would likely be around to see him, he just couldn't walk around outside in just his underclothes. In fact, he reckoned he'd better throw on a tunic too, as it got a bit chilly at night. Lucas stood at the door. He hesitated, hearing his mother's words in his head. Never go out past dark or you might get elf-struck. Could he really? He'd never seen an elf. Did they really exist? Maybe he shouldn't go out. His mother wouldn't say something like that if she didn't know it to be true. But he had to walk for a bit. He was feeling antsy. Maybe he'd just stick real close to the house. Yeah, surely he wouldn't get elf-struck so close to home. I'll bet people who get elf-struck are fools who walk around in the woods at night. Okay, I'll go. He had made his decision. Very carefully, Lucas opened the door. It squeaked. He froze, fearful he was going to wake up the whole house. The goat bleated once, but no one stirred. Lucas could hear his stepfather still snoring as loudly as ever. How his mom never got a wink of sleep was a mystery. Lucas slipped through the door and out into the night. Sticking within sight of his parents' cottage, he walked around near the edge of the fields. The wheat, rye, and oats had recently been planted. The full moon lit his path as he wandered away from his home, without thought for the danger. Lucas stopped and looked around at the village. Off in the distance, you could see the church, towering over everything else in the center of town. Not that it was a massive cathedral like those in the big cities, but it was still taller than everything else in Osheen. Lucas looked up at the night sky. Church every Sunday as the townsfolk prayed to Nana to forgive their sins. Was he in the forest, in nature as the pagans used to believe? Was he with Lucas up in the branches of the oak tree he loved so much? Lucas had the sense that the answer was yes to all of it. If the All-Father was the Father to all, then he must be anywhere and everywhere at once. Lucas's thoughts shifted back to Stephanie. He wondered where her town was in relation to his own. How far was it? In what direction? She never did say where she was from. Was she at that same moment looking up at the same full moon, thinking of him as he was her? Would he ever see her again? Oh, Father, I pray that I will see Stephanie again. I like her. Thank you for arranging our meeting today. I am most grateful. In truth, Stephanie's thoughts were, in fact, on Lucas. And she too wondered if she would ever see him again, and said a little prayer to the All-Father in the hope she would. As she slept, Stephanie dreamed that Lucas took her up to the very top of the oak tree. Somehow, in the strange logic of dreams, they were able to stand on the very tips of the top branches without breaking them and falling to the ground. From the vantage point of the tree, the two could see out the flat plain of Albion for miles in all directions. There's a whole world out there, she heard Lucas say in her dream.
Will you show it to me?
Her name is Stephanie. Consider me your tour guide, my lady. The scene faded and Stephanie slid back into the void in the dark void of dreamless sleep. Lucas stood at the edge of the forest, staring into the dark wood. Was there movement among the trees, he wondered? In all his worry about elves, Lucas had forgotten all about the possibility of a run-in with a wolf. He had walked all the way past the fields and was now at the threshold of the Lord's forest. Lucas looked around. He had lost sight of his house. Guess I went a bit too far. Better start back. Another flash of movement out of the corner of his eyes. A rustle amongst the trees. Twigs snapping. Lucas leaned forward. He squinted. Staring back at him were a set of glowing yellow eyes. Lucas drew in a breath. A wolf. But what stepped out of the woods was not a wolf. The elf grinned, a wide, malicious one that displayed its shiny white teeth. It crept out of the forest with a menacing gait, one that suggested a deliberate attempt at intimidation. It was working. The elf rubbed his hands together. Oh, what have we here? The fey creature's voice had a high-pitched, maniacal tone, like a dotty young man locked in an idiot cage. A peasant boy to play with? What fun! As the elf approached, Lucas slowly backed up. Having a moonlight flit, are we, peasant boy? The elf stood only about 5 feet, rather tall for one of its kind, but approached with the swagger of one that was more like 6 foot in height. Its pale green skin made Lucas think of the tales of the otherworld of Hibernian folklore. The long, pointy ears appeared demonic, while the dark eyebrows slanting in toward the nose looked like pure evil. Didn't your mother ever tell you never to go out at night? Asked the elf in a mocking tone. You could get elf-struck! It laughed, the high-pitched cackle of one gone completely bonkers. The elf finally caught up to Lucas. Expecting to get knocked in the head, he was surprised at what happened next. With the speed of a snake attacking its prey, the elf jumped up and kicked Lucas square in the chest, and then landed with the gracefulness of a cat. The impact knocked Lucas back several feet and took the wind out of him. Before he could recover, the elf attacked again. Grabbing a foot, the creature of the night picked him up and swung him around several times before letting go. The little bugger was strong. Lucas may have been killed had it not been for the fact that he landed serendipitously in a pile of hay. Not wanting another close call like that, Lucas sprang to his feet and took off running. The elf gave chase. What he discovered was that it was not only strong, but fast too. Oh, come on, peasant boy. Stay and play. Why run? Lucas eventually found himself in the village square, dodging behind buildings and scurrying through narrow alleys. Every time he seemed to get some distance between him and the elf, the wily creature would somehow catch up and be once more right at his heels. Or is this the game? Ooh, I love Catch Me If You Can. I'm so good at it. The elf shouted like a delighted child. Emerging from a warren of cramped alleyways, Lucas suddenly jumped over a large pothole he knew to be there. The elf was caught off guard and, being completely unaware of the deep crater in the uneven, ill-maintained road, leapt right into the huge puddle obscuring the hole. While not stopping the elf, the accident slowed it down enough for Lucas to gain another good lead over his assailant. When Lucas finally thought he could run no more, he spotted a wagon heaped with a large pile of hay. Cutting sharply to his left, he jumped into the cart and covered himself up with the straw as quickly as he could. By this time, the elf was back on his feet and resuming the chase, but just missed Lucas hiding himself by a few seconds. The elf stopped in his tracks and looked around. Oh, peasant boy, where are you? Lucas was trying very hard to control his breath. His heart was beating so loudly he was sure the elf could hear it. Fortunately for Lucas, he was deep enough under the hay that such sounds were quite muffled and unable to be heard even by the elf's acute hearing. Come out, wherever you are, I will find you. I always find my peasant boys when they hide from me. Lucas knew the elf was right. Eventually he would think to look under a pile of hay. He had to do something, but what? In nervousness, he twitched and writhed around at the bottom of the cart. As if in answer to his question, his hand came upon a rock that had accidentally gotten mixed in with the hay. Lucas closed his fist around the small stone. He had an idea. With great caution, Lucas raised his head up just outside of the hay pile. He drew in a deep breath and then let it out slowly. He closed his eyes and listened. He could hear the elf, the movement of feet, the sound of its breathing, and its nose making sniffing noises. Oh, Father, help me. The elf shifted. It had turned away, now facing the opposite direction of the hay cart. Lucas seized his moment. Quickly, he set up like a catapult hurling a boulder. He threw the small stone as hard as he could at the wall of the church. Oh, Father, forgive me. The rock made a loud sound that echoed through the village. The elf's ears perked up. It turned its head toward the church. The wind suddenly shifted. The elf sniffed the air like a dog. It caught Lucas's scent. The devious critter flashed a smug grin. It took the bait. The elf ran off in the opposite direction of the hay cart. Lucas breathed a sigh of relief and was far too frightened to move from the spot. He feared the elf might eventually catch on to his ruse and return. He listened for a long time for the thing to come back, but it never did. Several times Lucas almost sat up, but feelings of terror kept him immobilized. Finally, the lack of sleep, fear, and running around took their toll. Exhausted, the rest that had eluded him earlier came easily now. Still lying in the cart, covered in a thin layer of hay, he fell into a deep sleep. And that is the end of chapter 3. So, what do you think will happen in chapter 4? Any guesses?
Does he get taken away?
Where might he wake up? Probably not where he fell asleep. Thank you, guys.
Very nice.
One time I woke up where I didn't fall asleep. It was a bad night.